The following program is brought to you in part by Logisticare, the nation's leading provider of specialized transportation network management to state and local government clients. By Maine's credit unions, now is the time for a credit union. There is one for you. And by MacPage, developing relationships, earning trust, addressing complex issues, and making a difference.
Welcome to Pingree and Katz, the main event. In our left corner, we have Hannah Pingree, former House Majority Leader and Speaker of the House. In our right corner, we have Senator Roger Katz of Augusta, representing District 24. This week, Roger and Hannah have assembled a panel of experts to discuss tough Maine issues affecting the entire state. To wrap it up, we'll visit with Gary Crocker as he gives us his view from West Gardner. It's all right here with Pingree and Katz, the main event.
Hey, nice to see you again.
Great to see you, Roger.
I'm Roger Katz. I'm a Republican state senator from Augusta.
I'm Hannah Pingree, former Speaker of the House from North Haven.
And welcome again to Pingree and Katz, the main event. Today we're going to talk about welfare reform. You know, Hannah, like you, I ran for office and I knocked on thousands of doors, and it was really amazing to me. Most people really do want to provide a safety net for those who are disabled or temporarily down on their luck. But time after time after time, people would say, I'm sick of people abusing the system. And you know what, they'd really get upset about it is when it's their own relative. And they see a system that encourages dependency, that doesn't encourage people to get back to work. And they say to us as legislators, fix the system. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I am excited for this show, and I hope it's really about the facts, because I think the issues that we'll raise today will be thought-provoking. You know, clearly we want to get rid of abuse. We don't want people to be able to use the system, buy alcohol, you know, all the recent things we've heard about. But I want to bring it a little bit back to reality, and that is, why are we so focused, especially on the TANF program? A program which 7,500 families in Maine are currently on, which seems like actually a relatively small number. 70% of the people in the program are kids. So proportional to, you know, our discussion, you know, why aren't we talking about jobs for these families? Why aren't we talking about sort of bigger issues? So I think we're going to hear a great debate, and, you know, my question is really going to be, why are we so focused on this?
Exactly, and we're going to talk about food stamps as well. It's going to be a good discussion. We've got a great panel of guests. We'll be right back.
Great.
At MacPage, we believe in developing relationships, earning trust, addressing complex issues, and making a difference. We enjoy the people we serve and care about the work we do, providing integrated accounting, consulting, and tax services to our clients throughout New England and across the country. Please visit us at macpage.com to learn more.
And welcome back to the main event. We've got some great guests today. First of all, Robin Merrill, who's from the Maine Equal Justice Program Partners, and the Speaker of the House, Representative Mark Eves. Thanks so much for being with us. Hannah, who you got over there?
I have two great guests, and I'm so pleased that they joined us. State Senator Garrett Mason from Androscoggin County, as well as former State Senator Carol Weston, who is now the Maine Director of Americans for Prosperity. So I get to ask the first question. We're talking about welfare today, especially the TANF program. We've heard a lot from the governor recently. We've heard a lot from the Republican Party. So the first question for you, Senator, is give us an overview of the issue. Why is it so important to the Republicans? I gave a little context in the beginning talking about, you know, this is a program that 7,500 Maine families are on. Less than 1% of the Maine budget, relatively small issue among a lot of bigger issues. So why is it getting so much attention, and what are we talking about this session?
Well, I think it's not a small issue to the majority of people in Maine. As you know, Madam Speaker, all politics is local. And when I go out on the street, I hear a lot about people really wanting us to rein in costs, rein in spending. And those TANF programs are one glaring issue that is in front of the legislature. It may be only 1%, but you can liken it to a cop on the street, patrolling the highway. If we have only a few people speeding, should we stop trying to write tickets? So the Republican Party is just interested in making sure that we have accountability and that we have self-reliance for people in Maine. And I think that everybody really wants that. I think we just come at it from different angles.
Carol.
You know, it's really about those people and whether or not we're going to give them freedom to grow and opportunity, or we're going to make them dependent. I grew up in Aroostook County in a tar paper shack. My mother, I can hear it today, over and over said, at least we're not on the town. She worked hard. She worked whatever job she could get. And her dream was a white house with black shutters. And she got that dream not till I was in high school, but she got that dream from working. What I think TANF and other programs do is say, no, we want you to be dependent upon government. We don't want you to go out and have opportunity. We want to limit you. It's sort of like we tie a rope around their leg and say, you can only go this far. I want them to go, sky's the limit.
Well, thanks, Carol. Let me ask you first, Mr. Speaker, if I want to talk about a particular program, and it's the federal food stamp program, the SNAP program. Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. We had a bill last session that essentially would say, look, it's not right to use these taxpayer dollars to buy junk food. We want to provide people good nutrition, but why can they buy Coke and chips and candy with it, particularly when we know that those kinds of foods contribute to health problems and come back to bite us a second time for medical bills? So why isn't it a good common sense reform to say taxpayer money goes for nutritional food only?
Well, I think we certainly want to be encouraging all people to feed themselves and their kids nutritional foods. The fact of the matter is the access issue. So we don't want to be limiting choices for people. Of course, I mean, the alcohol and cigarettes came up this time around. Do you really want public taxpayer dollars go into that? Absolutely not. We want to make sure that our programs are good, they're meeting the need, the intent that they were directed to, and we are willing and wanting to make sure that our anti-poverty programs are doing what they're intended to do. So we have an open mind. We're going into a session where welfare is a large topic, but we have to be focused on making sure that we understand the true face of poverty. And the true face of poverty is a young mother with a child trying to make ends meet. And these programs are there so that they can get on their feet, get a good paying job. That's what we need to be focused on, and not nibbling at the edges, but really trying to solve the problem of poverty.
And no one's going to disagree with that. But Robin, let me come back to the food stamp issue again. When I was a kid, that meant going down to a distribution center where they would give you healthy food, literally food, powdered eggs, milk, peanut butter, things like that. Why shouldn't we get back to that mentality of using, again, this is taxpayer money to buy only nutritional food? And why was your organization so opposed to what seems like a pretty common sense thing to some of us?
Well, I think we want everybody to be making nutritious choices and to be eating healthy. And I don't think that should vary dependent on your socioeconomic status. So we encourage, education and incentivizing healthy choices. We just wouldn't do it in the kind of punitive way that bill set out to do. And I would just go back to the point that the speaker makes about poverty and the fact that 1 in 4 Maine children is living in poverty. And that number is increasing. And that is incredibly troubling. And that's the problem we really should be focused on addressing here. There are solutions to poverty that work, and we should be looking at those solutions.
So I guess one question is to the extent that our current system encourages that, or at least doesn't discourage it. Hannah?
Yeah. So just to actually respond, 1 in 4 kids in Maine is in poverty. That's something I know we all don't feel good about. The TANF program obviously is primarily a short-term program for parents. Most of them are single mothers. The program serves, on average, a family of 3, usually a mom and 2 kids, and they can only be on the program typically for 60 months. So it's sort of a short-term window to try to boost the family. Maybe I'll ask you, Carol, can you imagine, especially you talked about your own family's background, a family that this kind of program is appropriate for? Are you against the entire concept of TANF, or do you see scenarios where this kind of leg up for a small number of Maine families makes sense?
Oh, the government is there for the safety net. There's no question. But I will tell you that if the choice before her then was to go on to a welfare program and not go out and earn any money, her dream of a White House with black shutters would never have come true. We need to be there for the safety net. But when you limit, what we're saying to these people is, you come to us, we will tell you how much you can earn, and if you earn more than that, you're totally on your own. The safety net should be there, but it shouldn't be holding them prisoner to poverty. I think that's what government does. It holds them accountable only to the government levels. And if they want to stay and get that little check, then they don't work. It takes away their dream, and it says to them, you will only do what we let you do. And in a free country where freedom is what everyone wants, that dream of a White House is what most people dream about, then I want them to be able to meet that dream and have it.
Senator, obviously, I'm sure that the Republican Party doesn't feel good about 1 in 4 kids in Maine being in poverty. A lot of that is, due to their family circumstances or their parents don't have jobs. So talk to me about what the Republicans are doing this year to, help expand jobs and help deal with the problem, especially of kids in poverty.
Well, I think that, first of all, you have to recognize that what we have been doing hasn't worked. We have seen increasing numbers on TANF and on SNAP programs. We see I think we've actually seen a decrease in families on TANF. Recently, but over the past decade, it hasn't been good. We've seen a lot of people in the past that the income rate has stayed steady, but the programs have increased. So you have to look at that. You also have to look at the fact that this is not about kicking people when they're down or anything like that. This is about making sure that there's a safety net and not a safety hammock. We need to make sure that the people that are on these programs are headed for jobs, that they are working, that they are actively seeking employment. And if they can't make those requirements, then there's probably another reason and another program that they should be on. Maybe someone's disabled. They should go after a program like that. So those are the things that we need to be focused on, making sure that people are in the right place and not in a systematic decline into poverty.
Great. Well, thanks.
We're going to take a break now, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, and in particular, how do we make sure that it is a safety net for those who truly deserve it, but that we have certain expectations of people before they start asking for the taxpayer money so that we know that only the most needy are getting it. We'll be right back.
Now is the time. If you're ready for a home loan or a home repair, if you want to get behind the wheel of a new vehicle, make it happen with a visit to your local Maine credit union. For low loan rates, great terms, and decisions made locally. Everything feels right about a credit union, starting with people who are always willing to work with you. If you want a better way to borrow, join a Maine credit union, your best financial choice. Now is the time.
And welcome back to the main event. Now, picking up on the TANF discussion, one of the bills that the governor is proposing is to say, look, if my cousin comes to me and wants a loan, probably the first question I'm going to ask him is, well, Joe, have you gone and applied for a job? Have you tried to find a job? And if he says yes, and he hasn't been able to find one, I'll probably give him the loan. And if he says no, I'm going to say, get out there and look for a job for a little bit before you look to me for help. Why shouldn't we do the same thing with the TANF system? Why shouldn't we require a reasonable work search? Maybe apply for 3 jobs before the taxpayers are asked to help the person. Mr. Speaker?
Sure. And a lot of these proposals, they might look like good ideas on their surface, but when you really look into the detail of what they are requiring, the policies are just failures. And I think this is a good one where it might look like common sense on the surface, but it really, all it does when you look at the other states that have implemented such a thing, it just increases the barriers for people who are struggling right now. And again, going back to who and what is the face of poverty living in Maine with that mother with a young kid. These are families living in crisis, often fleeing domestic violence. We really need to understand who are the individuals we're trying to help and not put up barriers, but make sure that we're providing every opportunity to get people a good paying job.
Maybe we can build in exceptions to the general rule then. What do you think, Robin?
Well, I would just add that, the upfront job requirement doesn't make sense in that it undermines a new process that's in place. Actually, the Speaker passed a bill last session called Ticket to Work, which will work with each family and look at what their barriers to work are and customize the approach to overcome those barriers. That's going to help. It's a targeted approach based on family circumstances that will help get them to work. So it doesn't make sense to just do this across the board upfront requirement without addressing the real barriers to work that exist, like access to childcare and disability, and those things we really need to be looking at. I mean, I really want to add that, we hear a lot of talk about moving people from welfare to work, and that's great. I think that people want to move off of assistance. They want to be providing for their families. But in order to do that, there have to be good jobs available to people, and people have to be able to take those jobs. The governor's policies move people off of welfare, but they don't do anything to move people into sustainable employment. Instead, they move people into deeper poverty and homelessness. I mean, that's what we've seen in a study by Sandra Butler at the University of Orono, is that people are faring far worse after they move. 3,000 families have been moved off of TANF with time limits, and the hardships have only increased.
Somehow I don't think their other guests are going to agree.
Well, I'll give them a little chance to respond, but actually kind of going back to where we were before. I mean, a lot of this is about jobs. These are about families with parents often who are, trying to find employment with often young children. They have to have children to be in the program. Often it's a single parent. So again, what are we doing for actually a relatively small number of families, 7,500 right now in Maine, to help them find employment? And maybe I'll even take it a sort of a personal step further. What about raising the minimum wage? I mean, finding ways so that families in really low wage jobs can find ways to make ends meet and, support their families.
Like we said before, there's no nobody's trying to kick anyone when they're down. But what we need to do is we need to create good job-setting policies. And when you talk about job-setting policies, that means we need to make sure taxes are low. We need to make sure energy costs are low. Those are the things that go into creating jobs. Stacking more problems on top of old problems is not the way to create jobs. By making sure that there's work requirements, making sure that people are doing what they need to do to get off the system, that's what we need to do. Not just arbitrarily say that we need to create jobs, because there's other things that we need to do that.
You know what I'm remembering? I'm remembering when President Clinton passed the 5-year limit for TANF. And what I remember are the stories of women who said, I stayed at home because my check would come in, and if I left and if I tried to work, I was going to lose it. It wasn't until I was forced to go out and get educated and get a job, and most of them didn't rely on government to get that job. Their stories were incredible. You can go back now and still find their stories of how they found freedom, opportunity, and how their families had changed. And that can happen here in Maine just as it did those other states back then.
Well, President Clinton's welfare reform, it did become law in '96, and it's been law in Maine. And really, it is a different program in Maine than it was in the '90s.
But back then, when it passed, many states did limit it to 5 years. Maine did not. Maine let people be on it for years. We've seen multiple generations who have become dependent and who don't even understand that their dream is there and it is available to them, but they feel tied to that check, and that's what has to be broken.
Well,
maybe we can let Robin and the speaker even respond to that.
Well, in a second, but let me ask if I could, just one other common sense reform that's been proposed, and see what's wrong with this one. We get our TANF benefits, and people get their TANF benefits through EBT cards. Used to be cash, and now it's these EBT cards, but they can be used to get cash. Why shouldn't we restrict further what people can use this money for? Why can people take an EBT card, turn it into cash, and then walk into the liquor store? Why shouldn't we be saying, here's the list of things you can use with taxpayer money: rent, heating oil, food, clothing? And why has there been resistance to that? Robin?
Well, we all want there to be integrity in the program, and we want benefits to be used as they're intended to be used. But I think it's also important to keep it in perspective. So we need to address problems where they exist. But let's keep this in perspective. The numbers we saw as far as improper EBT card use show that 0.3% of transactions are being inappropriately done. So that means, in turn, that 99.7% of transactions are appropriate, the vast majority. So I just want to point that out to keep things in perspective. So we should be focused on. So let's keep that in perspective and focus on the real problem, which is poverty, and the fact that the 99.7% of families that are using benefits appropriately are still struggling to get by. And what can we do for those families? There are tried and true solutions to that issue, and we should be looking at those.
And no one can disagree with that. But right now the rules absolutely allow you to take that EBT card, turn it all into cash, and spend it on anything you want within the rules.
I would add there are restrictions already in place that are just being implemented currently that prohibit use of EBT cards in certain establishments. So those are in place. To make other changes, let's look at different changes and different things we can do, but we also have to consider administrative cost and the burden of implementing those kinds of changes.
Mr. Speaker, let me ask you. This is going to be a quick answer, because we're running out of time. What common sense reform to our system are Democrats willing to support in this session from your perspective?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that. I want to reflect really quickly on last session where we all passed the Ticket to Work law that really helps address the true causes of poverty and the help that is provided to get people out of poverty. These are struggling families. What we need to do is make sure that we're individualizing our approach, making sure that we are providing the job training necessary to make sure that these struggling families can transition off of assistance onto into a long-term job. So I just want to make a really quick comment about what Senator Mason said about kicking people when they're down, because I do think the governor's policies have failed the people of Maine. The increase of homelessness and the poverty rate are both up under this administration, and I believe those policies are a large contributing factor to that.
I'm reminded it's an election year. Thank you for a good and lively discussion. Hannah and I will be right back to solve the problems of the world in just a minute.
Thanks.
At MacPage, we believe in developing relationships, earning trust, addressing complex issues, and making a difference. We enjoy the people we serve and care about the work we do, providing integrated accounting, consulting, and tax services to our clients throughout New England and across the country. Please visit us at macpage.com to learn more.
Welcome back. Hannah, terrific panel of guests.
Great panel.
What do you think?
I think it's really important to hear the debate on both sides for Mainers, and I think really there's a lot in common in that everybody wants good jobs, more kids out of poverty, and I think there was some common ground. But the reality is the programs we're talking about serve a relatively small population. We've got to deal with waste, fraud, and abuse, and hopefully you'll do that this session, but then let's move on. Let's talk about jobs. Let's talk about taking families and kids out of poverty.
Absolutely, but I think to the man on the street and to our party, this is a real issue. There are hundreds of thousands of people on food stamps, actually, and what struck me was a number of common sense, to me, reforms that our party has suggested. I just didn't see much interest from the Democrats in doing them, and I don't quite get it.
Well, you've got a big session in front of you, so it'll be interesting to watch.
We will, but the person who's really got a handle on all this stuff is our friend from West Gardner, Gary Crocker, and we're now going to hear the view from West Gardner.
Well, first off, I've been going on and on for years about life in West Gardner. And based on some of my remarks, I think there might be some misconceptions out there. And I should probably clarify a few things first right off the bat. Not everyone in West Gardner lives in a trailer. Some folks are on a waiting list. And we're getting our arms around taking care of each other and ourselves. For one thing, we have an unusual food bank program. If you happen to be driving around in your Dodge Ram Charger 4x4 and just happen to run across a deer or a moose, and you don't have a weapon handy, think again. You're driving it. Yeah, simply throw her into four-wheel drive, accelerate across the open field in hot pursuit. And don't worry about getting stuck. Once November rolls around, the ground firms up nicely. And mud season ain't till March. Oh, and the food bank part? Have your roadkill cut up, wrapped, and share with your neighbors. They'll return the favor the next time Bambi steps in front of their truck. And other ideas for helping each other survive these difficult economic times and getting through another cold Maine winter are just piling up like cordwood. Things like saving ice during the winter to cool our coolators during the summer is just one more snappy idea that the brain trust at the transfer station has come up with so far. Thank you, Mert. Yeah.
Well, it's always good to hear from Gary how neighbors are helping neighbors all across Maine, especially in West Gardner. So thank you again for watching.
West Gardner is a special place, and Gary Crocker is a special person. Thanks again for watching Pingree and Katz, the Maine event, and we'll see you next time.
This program has been brought to you by Logisticare, the nation's leading provider of specialized transportation network management to to state and local government clients. By Maine's credit unions, now is the time for a credit union. There is one for you. And by MacPage, developing relationships, earning trust, addressing complex issues, and making a difference.